He was just a poor, old janitor, publicly fired by the arrogant CEO for being too slow. He was thrown out while the executives watched in silence. But when the company faced bankruptcy just days later, the same old man walked back into the emergency boardroom. He wasn't there to clean. He was there to hand the CEO a check for $10 million. Let us know in the comments, what city or country are you watching from today? In the gleaming steel and glass canyon of downtown, the headquarters of Vance Innovations stood as a monument to the future. It was a billion-dollar titan of technology, a place where algorithms decided fortunes and efficiency was the only god. And every morning, at 4 a.m., Arthur arrived. To the few early rising employees, he was just Arthur, the old janitor. He moved through the silent, sleeping offices like a ghost. His gray overalls faded, his movements slow but deliberate. He carried with him the scent of lemon polish and the quiet dignity of a man rendered invisible by time. He would polish the grand marble floor in the lobby until it reflected the dawn light. He would wipe down the glass walls of the executive boardroom, staring at the empty leather chairs. He would clean the coffee machine in the third-floor break room, always making sure to brew a fresh pot for the first arrivals. But Arthur wasn't just a janitor. He was Arthur Vance. And this building, this company, every microchip and every line of code, it was all his wife's. Eleanor Vance had been the sun to his moon. She was the brilliant engineer, the charismatic founder, the woman who built an empire from a garage with nothing but a soldering iron and an impossible dream. Arthur, a historian by trade, had been her anchor, her confidant, her greatest admirer. 6 months ago, a sudden illness had taken her. The silence in their sprawling, empty mansion had become a living thing, a suffocating presence. And so, 2 months ago, Arthur had done the only thing that made sense to his grieving heart. He'd applied for a job at the bottom. He'd become a ghost in the house his wife had built, just to feel close to her, to touch the legacy she'd left behind. He wanted to see if the soul of her company was still alive. What he found was that the soul was being systematically, surgically removed. The new CEO, Marcus Blackwood, was a man Eleanor herself had hired, her brilliant protege. Blackwood was young, sharp, and dressed in suits so expensive they looked like armor. He spoke in a language of metrics, synergies, and ruthless optimization. He saw the company not as a legacy, but as a machine, and he was determined to strip it for parts. Arthur saw it every day. The casual dismissal of older employees, the high-stress meetings that left junior staff in tears, the loyalty-first posters that felt more like a threat than a promise. Arthur was in the third-floor break room, meticulously refilling the sugar packets. The clock read 8:05 a.m. A young woman, Sarah Jensen, stumbled in, her face pale. She was a junior marketing associate, bright and creative, but wilting under Blackwood's regime. She was also one of the only people who ever spoke to Arthur. "Morning, Arthur. Thank God for that coffee. You're a lifesaver, you know that?" she sighed, rubbing her temples. "Good morning, Miss Jensen. A long night?" Arthur's voice was soft, unused. She poured a cup, her hands shaking slightly. "You could say that. We're preparing for the quarterly review. Mr. Blackwood wants a new, disruptive campaign by, well, yesterday. He says, and I quote, 'Creativity is just data we haven't harvested yet.' Mrs. Vance, she used to say creativity was our humanity." Arthur paused, his hand hovering over a stray napkin. He remembered Eleanor saying those exact words over dinner, her eyes sparkling with passion. "She was a very wise woman," he said. Sarah looked at him, surprised he would offer an opinion. "You knew her?" "I knew of her," Arthur said with a small, sad smile. "Everyone did. This was her dream." She leaned against the counter, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I wish she was still here. This place, it feels cold now, Arthur. It feels, I don't know, mean. Anyway, I shouldn't be bothering you. I've got to get back to the data mine." She gave him a weak smile and left the room. Arthur watched her go, a knot tightening in his chest. He wasn't just watching a company he didn't recognize. He was watching his wife's dream curdle into a nightmare. He picked up his mop and pail, his slow, steady movements belying the storm brewing inside him. He was just a janitor, and he saw everything. The day of the quarterly review arrived like a judgment. The air in the building was electric with fear. Mr. Blackwood strode through the halls, his personal assistant trailing behind him like a pilot fish. The main conference room, Eleanor's favorite room, with its view of the entire city, was packed. Executives, department heads, and senior managers sat around the massive oak table, their faces tense, notebooks open. Blackwood was on his feet, pacing before the floor-to-ceiling windows. Projections are down 12%. 12. His voice sliced through the silence. We are a shark people. If we stop swimming, we die. And right now, we are sinking. Marcus, the market is volatile, one executive offered. The new R&D directive was aggressive. Blackwood slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Aggressive? No. Your execution was pathetic. We are being outpaced, out-innovated, and outperformed. We are bloated. We are fat. We are slow. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, Arthur was pushing his cleaning cart. A junior analyst, running late for the meeting, had sprinted past him, knocking over a cup of coffee. Arthur was on his hands and knees, carefully wiping the dark liquid from the white grout, trying to be as silent as possible. Blackwood saw him. His eyes narrowed. A cruel, opportunistic smile spread across his face. He pointed a long, manicured finger at Arthur. This right here is our problem. Look at him. The entire room turned. 20 executives in $1,000 suits stared at the old janitor on his knees. Arthur froze, the wet rag in his hand. Blackwood walked to the glass door and slid it open with a thud. This is the culture we are fighting. Old, slow, inefficient, dead weight. We are a high-performance machine, and we are carrying passengers. How long have you been with us, old man? Arthur slowly rose to his feet. He was a tall man, and even in his overalls he had a presence. But he kept his eyes lowered, as was his role. 2 months, sir. Blackwood laughed, a cold, sharp sound. 2 months. And in those 2 months, what value have you added? You mop, you wipe, you push that squeaky cart. This company is on fire, and you are polishing the brass. From the back of the room, Sarah Jensen, who had been tasked with taking notes, stood up. Her voice was small, but it cut through the tension. Mr. Blackwood, he's just cleaning a spill. It was an accident. He's doing his job. Blackwood's head snapped toward her. His eyes were like ice. Miss Jensen, your job is to take notes, not to have opinions. Am I clear? Or perhaps you'd like to join him in the unemployment line. Sit down. Sarah turned white, then crimson. She sank back into her chair, utterly humiliated. Blackwood turned his venom back to Arthur. This symbolic purging starts now. You're fired. Get your things, get your squeaky cart, and get out of my building. The room was tomb silent. Arthur stood there for a long moment. He looked past Blackwood, at the executives staring at their notebooks, at the one staring at him with a mixture of pity and fear, and at Sarah, who was blinking back tears of shame. Finally, he nodded. Just once. A slow, dignified incline of his head. He didn't say a word. He turned, pushed his car to the service elevator, and pressed the button. As the doors slid open, he gave Sarah a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't a nod of defeat. It was a nod of reassurance. The doors closed. Blackwood straightened his tie, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. Now, let's talk about who's next. Arthur's cart squeaked down the hallway, the sound echoing his exit. He collected his few possessions from a locker in the basement, a worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and a framed photo of Eleanor, laughing, on the day they broke ground for this very building. He didn't exit through the lobby. He took the service tunnels to the underground parking garage, but he didn't walk to the bus stop. He walked to the far end of the garage, to a private, unmarked section. He pressed his thumb to a discreet scanner. A heavy steel gate rolled up, revealing a single car parked in the gloom. A vintage 1965 Bentley, black as night, gleaming as if it had just been polished. He got in. The smell of old leather and his wife's faint perfume, which still lingered, enveloped him. He drove out of the garage, not as Arthur the janitor, but as Arthur Vance. He drove to the penthouse he still kept in the city, the one no one at the company knew he owned. He entered. the panoramic windows showing the Vance Innovations building stabbing the skyline. His butler and longtime family assistant, a sharp-eyed man named Alfred, was waiting. "A difficult morning, sir?" Alfred asked. "You could say that, Alfred," Arthur replied, unzipping the gray overalls to reveal a simple, dark turtleneck and trousers beneath. "Marcus Blackwood just fired me." Alfred raised an eyebrow. "Indeed. And how did you respond?" I nodded, Arthur said, looking at the photo of Eleanor on his desk. He picked up the secure phone. "Get me Miriam, and get the rest of the board on a video call. Now." He didn't just fire a janitor, Alfred. He declared war on my wife's memory. For the next 48 hours, Arthur Vance moved with a speed that would have given Marcus Blackwood whiplash. Miriam, his chief legal counsel, arrived within the hour. The mostly ceremonial board was assembled. "He's running it into the ground," Arthur said on the secure video call. "But my gut tells me it's not just arrogance, it's intentional. I want a full, covert audit. I want to know where every single dollar is going. Miriam, I want his emails. I want his calls. I want to know what he had for breakfast. I am activating my rights as majority shareholder." What Arthur Vance's legal and forensic accounting team found was worse than he could have imagined. Blackwood wasn't just a bad CEO. He was a thief. He had been systematically sabotaging key client accounts, creating a crisis to drive the stock price into the ground. Simultaneously, he was using a series of offshore shell companies, companies Miriam's team traced back to his private equity partners, to buy up that stock on the cheap. It was a leveraged buyout, funded by the company's own assets. He was planning to crash the stock, take the company private, fire 2/3 of the staff, and sell the intellectual property to competitors. The crisis Blackwood was screaming about in the meeting wasn't a problem. It was his plan. "He's been funneling R&D funds to a shell in the Caymans," Miriam said, placing a final file on Arthur's desk. It's brazen, Arthur. He's using the company's pension fund as collateral." "He's not just tearing down the house, Miriam," Arthur said, staring out the window at the Vance building. "He's poisoning the well. The SEC will freeze his assets, but it will take days. By then, he might trigger the final sale. The emergency board meeting he called for tomorrow. It's to vote on a restructuring package. It's the final nail." "Then we will attend," Arthur said, a cold, quiet anger in his eyes. "Alfred, call the bank. I'm transferring $10 million from my personal accounts. This is for liquidity, for a promise." He turned to Miriam. "I want you to call security at the building. The real security. The team my wife hired. Not Blackwood's personal guerrillas. Tell them Mr. Vance is coming home. And tell them to secure the stage." "And you, sir? What will you be wearing?" Alfred asked. "I'm thinking a suit," Arthur replied, looking at the gray overalls hanging neatly on a hook, the one Eleanor always liked. The next day, the grand auditorium at Vance Innovations was not a meeting. It was a wake. Blackwood had called in emergency all hands, and the atmosphere was thick with dread. The news of the crisis had leaked. The stock was in free fall. People were openly weeping in the aisles. Sarah Jensen sat in the back row, clutching her bag. She had already packed her desk. On stage, Marcus Blackwood stood at a podium, a picture of somber, reluctant leadership. "My friends, my colleagues, it is with the heaviest of hearts that I must address you today. Due to unforeseen market conditions and legacy inefficiencies, we are facing a catastrophic failure." He let the words hang. He was an artist of fear. "The board and I have been working tirelessly, and we have found a path forward, a hard path. It will require restructuring. It will require sacrifices. Effective immediately, we will be forced to downsize 40% of our workforce." A collective gasp. A wave of horror rippled through the auditorium. This wasn't a layoff. It was a massacre. Blackwood was about to continue, to deliver the killing blow, when the main doors at the back of the auditorium slammed open. They didn't just open, they slammed open, echoing like a gunshot. Two uniformed security officers, men Sarah didn't recognize, stepped in and stood at attention. And then Arthur Vance walked in. He was not Arthur the janitor. He was wearing a perfectly tailored dark wool suit. His silver hair was combed back. His posture was upright, radiating an authority that silenced the entire room. He was flanked by his lawyer, Miriam, and two more men in dark suits. He walked slowly, deliberately, down the center aisle. Blackwood squinted from the stage, his face a mask of confusion and fury. What? What is this? Who the hell let you in here? I had you fired. Security. Security. Get this vagrant out of my building. Celled. Blackwood's personal security detail. Two large men near the stage moved forward, but they were intercepted by the two uniformed officers at the door. One of the officers, a tall man with a service record on his chest, simply shook his head. The other two uniformed officers, who had been standing discreetly at the front of the auditorium, suddenly stepped up onto the stage. They didn't look at Blackwood. They turned to face Arthur. And as Arthur reached the front row, the head of the security team on stage spoke into his microphone, his voice booming through the speakers. Welcome back, Mr. Vance. The stage is secure. The room exploded, not in sound, in silent collective shock. Jaws dropped, phones were raised. Sarah Jensen's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. Blackwood went pale. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy, terrified sheen. Vance, he stammered, his voice a pathetic squeak. What trick is this? Vance? As in Eleanor Vance? Arthur walked up the side steps and onto the stage. He walked directly to the podium, ignoring Blackwood as if he were a piece of furniture. He took the microphone from its stand. His voice, now amplified, was not soft. It was deep, resonant, and filled with cold, hard power. As in Arthur Vance, her husband, the co-founder of this company, and, as of 8 a.m. this morning, the acting CEO and undisputed majority shareholder. Blackwood stumbled back, grabbing the railing for support. No, you're a janitor. I fired you. This is a joke. The only joke, Mr. Blackwood, is your leadership. And the only thing I'm firing is your entire fraudulent operation. Arthur nodded to Miriam. The giant screen behind the stage, which had been showing Blackwood's restructuring plan, flickered. And then it showed bank transfers, emails, the names of the shell companies in the Cayman Islands. You weren't trying to save Vance Innovations, Arthur stated. You were murdering it. You were stealing from the woman who gave you your start. You were stealing from these people. You were stealing from her, from my wife's legacy. Every damning email, every illegal transfer was displayed for the entire company to see. It was undeniable. It was brutal. It was complete. You can't prove. Blackwood was trapped. Those are fabricated. Are they? Arthur nodded again. The main doors at the back opened one more time. This time it wasn't security. It was two detectives in city police uniforms. Mr. Blackwood, you are a thief, Arthur said. You stole from this company's accounts. You stole from its pension fund. And you publicly humiliated an old janitor who was just doing his job. The first two are crimes. The last was just a mistake. Your mistake. As the police officers began to walk down the aisle, Blackwood made a desperate lunge for the side exit. But the two uniformed security officers on stage, the ones who had welcomed Arthur, stepped in his path. They were calm. They were immovable. They held him, not roughly, but with an absolute finality, as the police officers climbed the stairs and produced a pair of handcuffs. You'll pay for this, you old fool, he raved, his mask of control shattered. All of you. This company is mine. The police led him away, his shouts echoing through the stunned, silent auditorium. Arthur Vance stood on the stage, the silence of the room heavy, fragile. He looked out at the sea of hundreds of faces, faces that were confused, terrified, and now dawning with hope. He let the silence sit for a moment. Then he spoke. My name is Arthur Vance. My wife, Eleanor, built this company on one principle, that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. For the last 6 months, I have walked these halls. I have cleaned your floors. I have listened. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. I listened to you worry about your mortgages. I listened to you talk about the toxic culture. I listened to you miss the very soul of this place, the soul Mr. Blackwood tried to rip out. He reached into his suit jacket. He pulled out a single check. He held it up. Mr. Blackwood was right about one thing. This company is in crisis. His crisis. But it is not bankrupt. Your jobs are not gone. He placed the check on the podium. This is a check for $10 million. It is not a severance package. It is a promise. It is the first installment of my personal fortune, which I am investing back into this company, back into you. A wave of quiet sobs, of relief, passed through the crowd. People were hugging. Strangers were clapping each other on the shoulder. This is day one, Arthur announced. We will rebuild. We will restore the pension fund. We will rehire the good people he pushed out. And we will have a new leadership, a leadership based on character, not just on metrics. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching, until he found her. He pointed to the back row. Miss Sarah Jensen, would you please come to the stage? Sarah looked around, pointing at herself, confused. The crowd parted for her as she walked, trembling, down the aisle. She walked up the steps. In a room full of executives, in a moment of intense pressure, when a man with no power was being humiliated, this was the only person who spoke up, Arthur said, to her and to the room. This is the only person who showed courage. She was willing to risk her job. For a janitor, he turned to her, his voice softening. That is the character my wife built this company on. That is the character we will be led by. Miss Jensen, congratulations on your promotion. You are the new head of corporate culture and ethics. Your first job is to help me find more people like you. Sarah stared at him, tears streaming down her face, before she finally, breathlessly, nodded. For the first time in 6 months, the auditorium filled with applause. It wasn't polite, it was thunderous, it was real. 1 month later, the Vance Innovations building felt different. The loyalty posters were gone, replaced with pictures of the company's history. Pictures of Eleanor, smiling. Arthur Vance, now Mr. Vance to all, walked the halls. He still wore simple clothes. He still stopped at the third-floor break room. But now, he wasn't cleaning. He was talking to the employees, listening to their ideas. He saw Sarah in a meeting, and she was glowing, confidently leading a discussion on new community outreach programs. He walked past the new janitor, a young man, and stopped. Good morning. Thank you for what you do. This floor looks magnificent. Oh, thank you, Mr. Vance, the startled janitor replied. Arthur, just Arthur. Arthur smiled, a true, warm smile, and continued on his way. He had come to this building to find the ghost of his wife. Instead, he had found her spirit. And in saving her legacy, he had finally, truly, brought her home. What part of Arthur's story resonated with you the most? Do you believe that true character is revealed when no one is watching? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We read every one. Thank you for listening.